Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. First step. I need to make a couple of announcements at the beginning. You've probably heard them if you've been in other sessions today or yesterday. Please silence all cell phones during this session. There will be a book signing following this session, which is in signing area 7, and that's on the festival map in the center of the event program. And then personal recording of the session is not allowed. My name is Scott Kraft, and I'm the page 1 editor of the Los Angeles Times. Every day down at the Times, we celebrate a tradition that goes back a century. We meet around a rectangular table and hear from the editors responsible for all the areas of our coverage. And that ranges from world news to entertainment news, from Bibi Netanyahu to Justin Bieber, who, by the way, is a foreign story because he's from Canada. So at least that's our story. A lot has changed in the news gathering business, but two of those changes, I argue today, are very relevant to this discussion. Despite circulation declines, the number of people reading LA Times stories, and really stories at all publications, is at an all-time high, thanks to the web. And the second thing is that the supposed decline in interest in serious and particularly international news is a myth. Can anyone guess what was one of the most read stories so far this year on LATimes.com? You probably think Justin Bieber, I would think. But in fact, it was a story from our State Department correspondent in Washington about the details of the Iran nuclear agreement. A story on nuclear negotiations. That single story is in the top 5 so far, shared more than 5,000 times, tweeted more than 1,500 times. And this is on a World Now blog that has seen a 74% increase in traffic just in the last year. So interest in foreign news is clearly very strong, which is why at the Times we have a dozen correspondents stationed abroad on 5 continents, and that's 12 more than any other newspaper west of the Mississippi. So that's a little ad for the LA Times. Our panel today is titled World in Crisis, and on the way over here, my fellow panelists decided that the world really wasn't in crisis. So we'll see how that goes. But we could have chosen a sunnier name. But let's face it, as Reuven Frank, who was the great longtime NBC News pioneer, once said, "Sunshine is a weather report, a flood is news." And so we're fortunate today to have some experts in world floods. Let me begin by introducing, hold on a second, let me find my spot. Sorry. If you look up international foreign policy experts in the dictionary, you'll find these 3 guys named there. Jerrold Green, to my left, is head of the Pacific Council on International Policy and a professor at USC. Before coming to USC, he was at the RAND Corporation. Among other things, Jerry is a Middle East expert. He was a Fulbright Fellow years ago in Egypt and spent 3 years in Israel. He also did field research in Tehran on the Iranian Revolution and is actually going back there later this year. Little known fact, he's a technical advisor on the Call of Duty video game series. So appearances can be deceiving. Heat can waste you. So be careful. Greg Treverton is currently at the RAND Corporation, where he's a senior policy analyst and director of the RAND Center for Global Risk and Security. His work has been in the fields of terrorism, studying it, not doing it, and as well as intelligence and law enforcement. Before coming to RAND, Greg worked with the first Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, handling Europe for the National Security Council. And in the 1990s, he was on the National Intelligence Council, which is responsible for America's national intelligence estimates. And to his right is Joe Cirincione. He is the head of the Plowshares Fund, which is a nonprofit that makes grants in the interests of global security. His latest book is called Nuclear Nightmares: Securing the World Before It Is Too Late. Before taking over the reins of the Plowshares Fund, he was with the Center for American Progress in Washington, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and on the staff of the House Armed Services Committee. He also will, another little known fact, he will literally go anywhere to talk about conflict resolution, because I saw his appearance on Stephen Colbert a few years ago.
That's right.
Colbert grilled Joe with questions like, will you at least admit that a nuclear explosion is awesome?
Yes.
To his credit, the way he replied was he played along but held his ground. It's not, he said, just a beautiful cloud. So, very good answer. For those of you tweeting today, it's hashtag Joe has a future in comedy. So let's begin with I'll begin with a broad question. We have professional trackers of storms around the world here today. Tell us what keeps you up at night. What global crisis, what hotspot worries you the most today? I'll start with Jerry.
Actually, those of you who've read the 2020 report that just came out about Los Angeles, that keeps me up at night. There are homeless people a block and a half from my office in downtown Los Angeles. That keeps me up at night. And then the part of what I'm supposed to be an expert on, I'm very deeply concerned about nuclear proliferation. I think that's a major, major threat to the future of humanity. I'm also deeply concerned about environmental problems, human rights issues, and then things that we take for granted which we cannot. Health, access to water, things of that sort, which are major, major problems. So I'm supposed to say, give the geopolitical answer, pick country A, one from column B, but I think it tends to transcend. I always say geography is a charming vestige of the 20th century, and it's more than simply geography. It's things that transcend borders and that we share with lots of other countries, including Iran, which, by the way, the Iranian people have no more, no greater desire than we do for a nuclear holocaust.
Thanks, Greg.
As the chairman suggested, I think some calibration is always useful. Because we've lived through past crises, they're bound to seem paler than the ones we're confronting at the moment. My own antidote to that is a memory of just after 9/11. I was having dinner with a colleague and mentor of mine, Jerrold Green, the former defense secretary, and I was pretty excited about what had happened, excited in a professional way about what had happened in 9/11. And so I asked him how big a deal he thought it was. And he said, well, if on a 0 to 10 scale, if 10 is the worst, the Cuban Missile Crisis was an 8, this is a 3. And I thought, surely it's 5, right? But it turns out he was right, that what we thought, many of us, was the beginning of an era of serious terrorism turned out to be the high water mark. And in any case, it's worth, I think, calibrating as you listen to people like us. As Scott also said, we're professional storm trackers. We are the sort of chatterati, and therefore likely to emphasize problems that we want to talk about and fix. So that is, I think, the backdrop for our conversation. I, like Jerry, think that there is not much geography, and I worry about lots of things close to home, Los Angeles, but also the gridlock that besets our country that makes it difficult for us to do anything creative in any realm. If I had to single out a particular region that worries me, to go to a more traditional geopolitical focus, I think I'm most concerned about Asia. So many things are happening at the same time there. There are the truths about the islands, but those are really fairly minor. They're worrisome as symbols of deeper sources of conflict. Not quite clear what's going on in China. It's stopped being the economy first country we thought of for a long, long time, and is now sounding a lot more like a normal power. Its future is also uncertain. We know that its growth rate is going to go down. And if we look at correlations with other countries, the chances that some serious bump in the road will happen, maybe positive, maybe negative, from our interests, seem pretty likely. And at the same time, We see Japan increasingly nervous